I think when it comes to North Korea, we all know they have nuclear weapons. I do have concerns that if we do abandon denuclearization as an end goal, it has several serious ramifications.
And I do want to turn to the issue of North Korea human rights issue. Good to go? Thank you for coming and being here with
pleasure.
us. So I want to talk to you about the whole Trump 2.0 presidency. You know, President Trump referred to North Korea as a nuclear power. And I think you have much to say about that as well.
Now, he is a nuclear power.
So how do you interpret this kind of characterization?
A couple of things right in the beginning. One, we don't know what their policies will be, and that they haven't had a Indo-Pacific strategy review or policy review. And there's also, I think, a tendency to overinterpret or even misinterpret statements. Particularly on sensitive issues like North Korea and Taiwan, where there's certain phrases that people who don't work it 24/7 may not understand the implications. And so I think when it comes to North Korea, we all know they have nuclear weapons. So you can assess that they have nuclear weapons without acknowledging or accepting them as a nuclear state. So those of us who work Korea for some time sort of know the nuances. But the president doesn't. And similarly, Secretary of Defense Hegseth also called them a nuclear power. It can seem troublesome that this is an indication of a major shift, but it could also just be they don't realize the nuances of the words.
But do you think there might be a shift in terms of North Korea policy where, like you mentioned, it was denuclearization as an ultimate goal for the U.S., but there might be a slight change to arms control instead?
Right. Well, again, we don't know. But I do have concerns that if we do abandon denuclearization as an end goal, it has several serious ramifications. You know, some would say we don't think they're going to give up the nuclear weapons. You know, some have thought that since 1994 with the agreed framework.
I am pleased that the United States and North Korea yesterday reached agreement on the text of a framework document on North Korea's nuclear program.
But there are ramifications. So the complete, verifiable, irreversible dismantlement is not only a U.S. policy goal, it's the requirement of under 11 UN resolutions. It's also the policy under U.S. legislation. So, and it's also the sort of the indirect goal of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. So if you were to abandon denuclearization as an end goal, you're going against not only decades of policy, but you're going against UN resolutions, U.S. law, the Non-Proliferation Treaty.
Yeah. Well, we don't know what kind of, extreme action Trump might take. But at the same time, Trump showed that willingness again at his first interview with Fox that he's willing to meet with Kim.
Reach out to him again.
I will.
So do you think the ball is in North Korea's court? Do you think that there might be a chance for engagement again?
Again, we don't know if Trump is just sort of saying that, highlighting his friendship.
And I just received a beautiful letter from Kim Jong-un, and I think the relationship is very well, but I appreciated the letter.
But the world is very different than it was 8 years ago when Trump came in the first time. North Korea certainly has improved its military, its nuclear, its missile capabilities in the last 4 and last 8 years. So any agreement, I think, would have a much higher price. And also, Kim may not feel as big a need to come back to negotiations as he did during the time of Singapore, because he's getting so much more benefits with far fewer conditions from Russia. And in August, before the election, North Korea said, we don't care who wins. You both represent a hostile policy. We don't want to talk to you unless one of you were to abandon military exercises and rotational deployment of strategic assets, both of which Trump did unilaterally, got nothing in return for them.
So it kind of sounds like Trump is really lacking some kind of leverage on his side because now he has to really make that promising action, and that's going to be very hard for him to really, give it to North Korea because, like you said, it's going to be a win for North Korea then.
Another thing that I'm concerned about is if North Korea were to sort of dangle a peace declaration or a peace treaty. Trump has talked about ending forever wars. Secretary Rubio also talked about
lowers the risk of an inadvertent war, be it between South Korea and North Korea.
And then Hegseth also talked about ending wars responsibly. Whether that's a signal that the U.S. would be willing to accept a peace declaration or peace treaty, again, we don't know. But the danger there is if North Korea were to say, you can, Mr. President, can do what no president has done. You can end the war, end a 70-year war. You can achieve what no one else has, Nobel Peace Prize. And you can easily sign a document, but you haven't actually reduced the threat to South Korea, Japan, and the United States. So it could have serious ramifications because it would seemingly lay the foundation for removing or reducing forces in Korea, Japan, without actually having reduced the threat.
And I do want to turn to the issue of North Korea human rights issue. Do you think Secretary Rubio might be focusing more on human rights because he's been co-sponsoring all these acts while he was in Senate? So how do you foresee the human rights issue?
Well, the human rights advocates often complain that their issue takes a backseat to security issues. And one of the results was that, with the North Korean Human Rights Act, to try to elevate the importance of human rights in our interaction with North Korea. I think it's a very important component of the overall U.S. policy towards North Korea. It's also a very inherent part of U.S. values and principles. So we need to advocate for human rights throughout the world. Secretary Rubio has been very vocal in advocating on behalf of North Korean human rights. The question would be, if President Trump wants to go down the path of engagement, very fast, very strong engagement, would advocating for human rights be seen as an impediment? So you could have conflicting priorities of Secretary Rubio's longstanding advocacy for human rights, but if that gets in the way of a nuclear or other agreement, then again, it might take a backseat.
A lot happened, but just regarding North Korea, he said a lot of stuff, but that does show that Trump is very interested in this issue.
How's Kim Jong-un doing?
So he will take further steps. Well, what would be the next step that he might take?
Well, I think they have to do a policy review. And what I hope that comes out of it is a very strong affirmation of U.S. support and defense and commitment to our treaty allies, South Korea and Japan. To do that, you need to have an affirmation of your resolve, as well as maintaining your capabilities and continually seeking whether you have to improve those. I'm more in favor of a bottom-up approach where you reserve summits for actually after you've made progress rather than rushing in an ill-prepared summit as been done in the past. So we need to use the summit meeting as leverage for getting progress from North Korea.
Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. I will see you guys next time.
That's a cut.